Hello, everyone. My name is Luke Tannen. I'm the Executive Director of Chicago Innovation, an organization that educates, connects, and celebrates innovators in the Chicago region through a variety of events and programming for companies across industries, large and small, for-profits and nonprofits. And we are also, I might add, a proud partner and customer of Wintrust. On behalf of Wintrust, I want to thank you for tuning into Paycheck Protection Program 2021. Now, on the next slide, you will see today's agenda. So after my brief introduction, we're going to talk about eligibility, application, documentation, FAQs, and then we'll do a very quick wrap up. Now, for lots of organizations, ours included, PPP loans were a critical part of keeping businesses humming along this past year during COVID, which really has been both a healthcare crisis for people, as well as a financial crisis for many industries. And with us today are some of Wintrust experts who can help shed light on this very important topic now that the government has made a new round of PPP loans available. And speakers from Wintrust today include Nancy Kuzma, Vice President of Business Banking, and Brian Rines, Vice President of SBA Credit Administration, who will be going through key things you need to know to navigate the current PPP application process. And I say current because indeed it is important to know the latest updates. And that's why, for reference purposes, we've added some links here that we encourage you to visit to learn about the latest updates about this program. But please note, this presentation is solely for informational purposes, and it is not intended to provide legal, tax, accounting, or financial advice. In making any decisions relating to obtaining a PPP loan, of course, please consult with your legal, tax, accounting, or financial advisors as necessary. And with that, it is my pleasure to hand the Zoom microphone off to Brian Rines.
Thank you very much. As with any SBA loan, the first place to start must be with eligibility. The last thing that anybody wants to do is commit to a loan, or as a borrower request a loan that you were never eligible for. The purpose of this program is to get funds into struggling businesses' hands to use towards payroll, and the last thing that anyone wants is to find out when you're seeking forgiveness that you weren't eligible for the program, and therefore forgiveness is denied by the SBA. To start off, we'll start with the first draw of PPP loans. And to qualify for a first draw PPP loan, companies and eligible nonprofits must meet one of the following eligibility criteria. Please note that a borrower must be considered together with its affiliates, and it is important that you review the SBA affiliation rules before applying for a PPP loan. The criteria is fewer than 500 total employees, again, combined with your affiliates. There are a couple enterprises that threshold is 300 employees. You can also qualify if you exceed the 500 or 300 threshold by using the SBA industry size standard. You can view this by going to the SBA website, and it is usually organized by NAICS code. The third option to qualify for an SBA PPP loan is the affiliation size standard. Now, the definition of the affiliation size standard is your tangible net worth does not exceed 15 million, and the average net income after federal income taxes, excluding any carryover losses for the last 2 full fiscal years, does not exceed 5 million. Any of those three, you would qualify for a first draw PPP loan. There are certain affiliation waivers under the program that apply for small businesses in the accommodation or food service sector, religious organizations, franchises, SBIC financed businesses, and eligible news organizations. Now, one of the caveats with an accommodation and food service sector is they would begin with NAICS code 72. And when applied, that affiliation waiver does allow you to have 500 or fewer employees at any single physical location. In regards to religious organizations, the affiliation waiver is applied if the affiliation is based on the practice of that religious belief. An example of this would be if a religious organization also owns a nursing home, that nursing home would not be subject to the same affiliation waivers that an eligible church might be eligible for. The maximum loan amount of a first draw PPP loan is 2.5 times your average monthly payroll, plus the amount of certain refinanced economic injury disaster loans, EIDLs, up to a total of 10 million. Please note that corporate groups are subject to a 20 million aggregate limit for first draw PPP loans. Next slide, please. Second draw PPP loans. Congress and SBA recently added second draw availability to certain eligible borrowers. To qualify for a second draw PPP loan, companies and eligible nonprofits, again considered with their affiliates, must meet the following eligibility criteria. Borrower was eligible for and received a first draw PPP loan. The borrower has used or will use the full amount of its first draw PPP loan on authorized purposes on or before disbursement of the second draw PPP loan. That does allow you to apply for a second draw PPP loan prior to deploying all of the funds from the first draw, but that second draw cannot be dispersed. I just want to point out that nuance. Back to the eligibility, it employs not more than 300 employees in the second round. SBA defined affiliation waivers that we previously discussed apply to this as well. The last eligibility criteria is the borrower can demonstrate a 25% or greater reduction in gross receipts, which is defined by the SBA, when comparing a calendar quarter in 2020 to the same calendar quarter in 2019. Please note that the application does lay out many different scenarios if a business was only open in one quarter of 2019, 2 quarters of 2019, opened in the beginning of 2020 prior to February 15th, 2020. Gross receipts of a borrower must be aggregated with the gross receipts of its affiliates, except where the affiliation rules have been waived. The maximum amount for a second draw PPP loan will be 2.5 times your average monthly payroll, up to $2 million. The exception to this, as previously mentioned, would be in the accommodation and food service industries. NAICS's code beginnings with 72. They are eligible for 3.5 times their average monthly payroll. Corporate groups under a second draw PPP loan are subject to 4 million aggregate limit. Next slide, please. It's also important when you're talking about eligibility to understand what those funds must be used for. So under the program as it's been defined, and this has changed throughout the program, but we're going to focus on the rules that are in effect today, at least 60% of the funds must be used for payroll costs. Even if the business believes that it would be better used elsewhere, in order to obtain forgiveness, you must use at least 60% for payroll costs. Up to 40% of the loan can be used for any combination of the following. Now, again, it can be used 100% for payroll costs if that's what the decision is, but up to 40% can be used for the following: interest payments on mortgages, leases, rent, eligible utility payments. And under the current legislation, it was expanded that these following categories are also now acceptable, but please understand that they can be applied retroactively. So if a first draw PPP loan was obtained and you used any of the proceeds towards these purposes, it is eligible for forgiveness, even though that was not defined at the time the loan was given. These additional categories would be certain business software and cloud computing expenses, uninsured property damage costs from damage in 2020 due to vandalism, essential supplier costs, and certain worker protection expenditures such as PPE and facility adaptation costs. For more information about these eligible expenses, please visit the PPP loan page of the SBA's website. When you're looking at forgiveness, please understand that all or a portion of any PPP loan may be eligible for forgiveness. Subject to certain restrictions, the portion of the loan eligible for forgiveness may consist of payments for eligible expenses made during the SBA defined covered periods following your loan funding. For additional information about forgiveness, please visit the SBA website referenced above. I'm now going to pass this over to Nancy Kuzma to discuss the application.
Hi, there are two applications that can be used for payroll protection applications. And the first one we're going to discuss is the first draw application. So with the first draw application, the first important thing to remember is that the application has to be filled out completely. So as we're going to talk, we want the slide with the application. As we're talking about the application, we're going to start up in the first part of the application on the left-hand side. The first thing you want to put in is your entity information. If you're a C Corp, a sole proprietor, you need to check that box. If you are a DBA, make sure in the box next to that, you fill out the DBA name and the years that you've been established, the year you established. Then below the business name, it's very important that you put the correct legal name of the business in this section. The legal name of the business is whatever you have registered under, your entity documents say. So please make sure that's accurate. The next box is for the NACIS code. That's the code we talked about that is what your business is registered under. That's where that section goes. If you need to have some information on what your NACIS code is, there's a link at the end of this PowerPoint that you can reference the NACIS code to look it up. In the next box, you're going to choose that you hopefully check the box that says you have no more than 500 employees, or whichever box you qualify for here. Below the business name, please put the complete business address. In the next box, it's going to be your EIN number. This is very important. Please put the complete EIN number. You don't have to put any dashes. If you're a sole proprietor and you're using your social security number, then you can put that there instead. Your business phone number and the primary contact is very important also. The person filling out the application is usually the primary contact. And then the email address. In the section below, this is where you're going to calculate what your average monthly payroll is. So you're going to take your year's payroll, all of either, you can use 2019 or 2020. And if you're using 2019 or 20, you're going to add up the total amount of payroll, divide it by 12, and put that number in that box. That's your average monthly payroll. And then in the next box, you are going to multiply that total number by 2.5 and put it in the next box. And that will tell us how much to give you, how much your application should be. In the next box, you want to put the number of employees. Now below are the reasons that you might be using the funds in addition to payroll. So if you're going to use 100% for payroll, that's fine, but you might want to check the boxes if you're going to use the other 40% for rent, utilities, or any of the other covered expenses. In the section below this, it's the ownership information. This is very important. We want to put the owner's names. Now, all owners that have at least 20% ownership of the business will have to be listed here. So you want the owner's name, their title, their percentage of ownership, and their social security number. So this is the owner's social security number. And the owner's address, not the business address. This would be the owner's address. Next, we're going to get into the questions. So questions number 1 through 9 need to be answered yes or no with a checkbox, a check mark in the box. When we get to question number 5 and number 6, it's very important that you remember to put your initials in box 5 and 6 so that certifies that you have answered these questions. So that is something that's been missed on a lot of the applications. So please remember to initial 5 and 6. Now we're on the next page of the application. And each of these questions will have to be initialed. Put your initials to the left of each one of these questions. At the bottom, the next thing you're going to do is sign it, date it, print your name, and print your title. It's very important that you remember to sign and print your name and date the application. And that at the very last page of this application, we ask for a small amount of information. We want the principal's name, This is on page 5 of the application. The principal's name, so that would be the person completing the application, their position, and then if you'd like to, answer the questions on whether they're a veteran, their gender, their race, and their ethnicity. That completes the first draw application. And now we're going to talk about the second draw application. This application is for anybody who received PPP funds the last time. And if you've previously received PPP funds, then this is the correct application. Again, you want to choose your correct entity, check that box. If you're a DBA, you're going to put it in the next box and the year your business was established. Underneath, you need to write your complete, accurate business name and your NACIS code, again, as we talked about earlier. Your NACIS code is very important. Your complete address, including zip code, your business tax ID number, your business phone number, who the primary contact is, and the business email address. Again, here in this application is where you're going to put your average monthly payroll, as we discussed the last time, and you're either going to be multiplying that by 2.5 or 3.5, depending on your industry, and then the number of employees. Below is where you're going to check what else you may be using the funds for. And here is a very important section here. You will need to put your first draw SBA number in this box. This is not the loan number at the bank. This is the loan number that the SBA gave you, and that should be in the documents that you signed when you applied for your first PPP. So that is your SBA loan number. The next section is for anybody who is receiving a loan of $150,000 or more, and it has to show a loss of at least 25%. So if you receive $150,000 or less, you do not have to fill out this section. But if you received more than $150,000, this does need to be filled out. So you can choose any quarter of 2020 to compare with any quarter of 2019. So if second quarter of 2020, you had a loss of 20% or more, second, third, fourth, you can choose any quarter of 25% or more, you want to put which quarter you're referring to in the upper box. And you are going to reference that with the same quarter of the previous year from 2019. You're going to put the total gross receipts for 2020 underneath there and the total gross for 2019. That all has to go in that box. It's very important for any applications over $150,000. Now below, you're going to again put the owner's names, anybody who has a 20% or more share, their name, their title, their percentage of ownership, their social security number, and their address goes in those boxes. Now we're on the questions. Questions 1 through 8 have to be answered with a check mark on yes or no. When we get to question number 4 and 5, it's very important that you initial both of those boxes where it says initial here to confirm your response. Question number 4 and 5 has to be initialed. When we go below to the next page, you are going to put your initials next to each question. Each question has to be initialed. Then the next page of the application has a few more questions. Again, every box has to be initialed. And then you need to sign the application, date the application, print your name and your title. It's very important to have a complete application. The bank has received many applications that have been incomplete, and this holds up the process, or the loan may be turned down because of an incomplete application. So please take your time in reviewing the application. After you've filled it out, review it once or twice and make sure every box is filled out, everything is signed before you submit the application. The final page of the application, page 6, again asks for the principal's name, your position, and if you will, you can put in your, whether you're a veteran, your gender, your race, and your ethnicity. And that's all we need to fill out a PPP application. Back to you, Brian.
Thank you, Nancy. Moving on to the required documentation that will be needed to be submitted in order to properly process the loan application. Keep in mind that the bank gets to rely on the certifications of the borrower for a lot of the eligibility requirements. But when it comes to confirming that the payroll represented on the application is correct, the bank is tasked with performing a good faith review. And these are the documentation that will be necessary depending on the type of borrower that you are. Completed application for first or second draw borrowers as appropriate. IRS Form 941 quarterly tax filings that will be required for all 4 quarters. IRS Form 944 annual tax filings. Payroll reports provided by the borrower's third-party payroll provider or payroll system of record may be accepted to verify the annual wage amounts. Copies of paid invoices for eligible insurance premiums. Copies of unpaid invoices for eligible insurance premiums, but these must be accompanied by your proof of payment. Reports from other third-party benefit administrators may also be acceptable to verify payments and or other eligible benefit costs. IRS Form 1040, Schedule C for independent contractors, sole proprietors, and single member LLCs. IRS Form 1040, Schedule F for self-employed farmers and ranchers. IRS Form 1065, Schedule K1 for partnerships. And evidence that you were in operation on February 15th, 2020, which is when this program was rolled out. This can be done by payroll statements covering the pay period that includes February 15th, 2020, or for eligible borrowers without employees, an invoice, bank statement, book of records, something to show that you were in operation on or before that magical date of February 15th, 2020. Next slide, please. For second draw PPP loans, all of the documentation submitted above will be necessary, but in order to support the 25% revenue or gross receipt reduction for a comparable period, calendar quarter 2020 versus 2019, previously mentioned, acceptable supporting information may include the following. Relevant tax forms, including annual tax forms, is the preferred method. If those are not available, then either quarterly financial statements or bank statements. Please understand that the quarterly financial statement should be the entire statement, not a single page. As Nancy mentioned, borrowers requesting $150,000 or less are not required to provide supporting documentation at the time of application. However, it will be required with the application for forgiveness.
So in closing, these final slides here are some more detailed FAQs for you regarding the PPP loan process, and they will be as part of this PowerPoint presentation that's going to accompany this recording. So you'll have a chance to read through all of them as you're navigating this important process. So as we wrap things up here, I want to thank Brian and Nancy. What thorough and thoughtful presentations that you both shared on this incredibly timely topic that is very top of mind for a lot of people right now. Now, as a reminder, the presentations today were solely for informational purposes and not intended to provide legal, tax, accounting, or financial advice. So as I mentioned before at the beginning, in making any decision relating to obtaining a PPP loan, be sure to consult with your legal, tax, accounting, or financial advisors as necessary. So thank you all for tuning in. Be well and take care.